Yay. Oops, we got it. Ready? All right, so the last class, gosh, I can't even remember what we finished talking about, but pretty much the whole meat of the grant application, and we wrapped it up with the budget. For this time, we are going to talk mostly about the executive summary. Then I'm going to give you some little tidbits, a little bit of what to do when you get the grant. And then we will talk a little bit about the Buhl Regional Health Foundation grant process as well. So we'll start with the executive summary. There we go. And the executive summary is also called the abstract for different grant proposals. And it's actually the first thing that the reader sees, and probably, and I know I say this about every part of the proposal, but it probably is the most important part of the proposal. And my tidbit for you is to write this executive summary last so that you incorporate all of the important pieces of your entire grant into it. The executive summary should really be tailored for the specific grant that you're writing. This is not a boilerplate piece of material that you cut and paste into each grant application. Because like I said, each application is going to be a little different. The order might be different. And so your executive summary might include different things to it. Don't rush through the executive summary. And don't think of it as any less important than the rest of your grant. Like I said, I think it's probably one of the most important pieces. It's usually what your program officer is going to take to their board members. Now, for the Buhl Regional Health Foundation, our process is a little different, but I've written grants for a lot of different organizations where you're really, the meat of the grant is being sent to different board members for review. But the executive summary goes to all of the board members. So, you might have finance people that are going to look at your budget and your budget narrative, but they're also going to receive the executive summary. You might have a program person who's going to look at other pieces, but they'll receive the executive summary. So it's important for it to be concise and clear. And it really should only be maybe 1 to 2 pages long. Should be very compelling, easy to read, and it should be one of those documents that you kind of can glance through and pick out the important parts of it. So it's a little bit trickier to get it written properly. There shouldn't be anything in that executive summary that you don't touch on throughout the grant. So you don't want to have a little tidbit in your executive summary and they're reading through your grant and it's like, well, they talked about this in the executive summary, but where is it in the application? It has to give the grants reviewer a good sense of the need of the program. A little bit of the background, just briefly, how the program answers the need in the community, a little bit about who you are as an organization, very brief, the goals and objectives, and for sure you want in there how much it's all going to cost. Oftentimes the funder will specify how long that executive summary should be, but it should be as brief as it possibly can be, but still getting the point across. If the executive summary, for instance, you're doing an online application and they give you 3,000 characters, but you get your executive summary done in 900, don't feel like you've got to fluff it up and put more into it because they're asking for a high number of characters. Really, you just want in there what you need to get the job done. So oftentimes this is the document that is going into a recommendation packet from the program office, not just to a committee, but to the entire board. And so it does have to be short and brief. To put it together, you need to go back through your grant sections and then write a sentence or two that describes what is discussed in each section. So, if you have like the description of your organization, you might want one sentence that just briefly says, maybe you have 2 paragraphs in your grant application about your history of your organization or the background of your organization, but you want to summarize that into maybe 1 to 2 sentences. Who are you? Where are you located? What area do you serve? What service do you provide? How many people do you serve? And how long have you been in existence? And really 1 to 2 clearly written brief sentences. And then probably the next thing that you would want to address, which probably is the next thing in order of your grant application, is what is the problem that you're addressing? So your problem statement. Just give a small taste of the statistical information that you have included in your proposal. You don't have to go, here's the national statistics, here's the state statistics, here's the county statistics. Just what is the most compelling statistic that you have in that grant application? Then you're going to want to talk a little bit about the program, explaining how it's going to address the problem. So you need, obviously problem statement, then what are you going to do? Briefly summarizing your objectives and briefly summarizing the activities that you're going to conduct related to those objectives. If you have partners or other funders, it's very important to have them in your executive summary. And then just briefly touching on how you feel you're going to evaluate your program, or what does the success of the program look like to you? In literally 1 sentence. We're not talking, paragraphs here. You do want in there the overall cost of the project, and then you want how much you're requesting from the funder. So definitely make sure that that's one of your sentences in the executive summary. And then how much are you contributing? How much are you contributing in kind, and if you have cash? But this is not the place to list out all of those in kind donations. And then after you write the summary, the following questions should be answered by that summary. And that would be, does it clearly identify you and your organization? Does it describe the specific need? There's our owl chewing again, huh? We have a meeting owl here in our room, and sometimes it makes odd noises, so I apologize. And then the third thing is, does it mention the total program, the project cost, and the amount of funding requested? So those are the 3 main meat of your executive summary. And then look at your length. If it's no more than 2 pages or within whatever the maximum page length the funder asks for, then you should be good to go. Like I said, it should be brief. It should briefly touch on each piece of your grant application. Just simply overall, here's our organization, here's our program, here's our budget, here's how we're going to measure our goals and objectives, and how we're going to ensure that we get the job done. So then the rest of the grant application, appendices, attachments, those are things that we did already talk about. Some people put a table of contents. I actually never put a table of contents into a foundation grant application. I don't know about state or federal grants. Sometimes they might like one, especially if it's longer than 5 or 6 pages. For much longer proposals, then obviously you would want even like your proposal sectioned out. With like page 1 might start with these particular pieces, and then finish out that section, and then page 3 might end up being a whole new section. And then if you started with an outline with subheads, as we talked about in one of the previous classes, then your table of contents would be fairly easy to complete, because you would just simply take that outline and your subheads and just find what page numbers they go on. I know like word processing, like Word and different word processing software actually compiles that information for you when you're using the headings and subheading features. So definitely do what you need to do to make your job easier. The appendices and attachments, also let you add into your proposal things that weren't necessarily asked for by the funder, but that you feel are important, especially with those grant applications that are online and have character limits, and you weren't able to get into the meat of your grant exactly what you needed to get in there. Find different ways to add that as an attachment. So for instance, if you mention that you have a diverse board, but the application didn't ask for who the board members were, or didn't give you enough space to include, in general, who some of your board members were, then you might find it compelling to add your list of board members, to upload it or attach it, add it as an appendix to your application. If you've won something, maybe a prestigious award in your community recently, like we talked about, and maybe there was an excellent newspaper article that was in your local paper, include it as an attachment if you can. What else might you include in the attachments? Pretty much anything else that the funder asks for. And this is really important when you're doing online grant applications, because sometimes people kind of skip over that, upload your attachments here. They see, oh, upload your attachments. They're like, well, I really don't have anything to upload. But your funder is specifically going to say, okay, you need to upload your 501c3 documentation here. You need to upload your board of directors. So make sure that that you don't just kind of glaze over that and say, oh, I don't really have anything to add. Make sure you're looking at that and uploading what they want. Sometimes they'll want the most recent audited financial statements uploaded, an overall budget for your current fiscal year, the latest annual report. We talked about annual reports. If you don't do an annual report, it might be a good idea to just put like an annual newsletter together. Definitely, if you have, this is a large program and you have a lot of funders and you're able to upload a list of funders that are receiving requests from you, that would be important, and also the status of their request. Profiles of key staff. Normally, what's expected with key staff is maybe a one-page summary of the experience and the qualifications. Sometimes funders will ask for resumes like we talked about before. And then, make sure that your resumes are up to date. Make sure that you as the grant writer are reaching out to the staff that you need resumes for, and making sure that they're updated every year. You don't want to look like there's gaps in job history or anything like that. And then, like I said, news articles. If there was some sort of an evaluation done for the program, that might be interesting to upload. Don't include links to videos unless it's specifically asked for, because a lot of times, like I know here at the Buhl Regional Health Foundation, like we can't forward on videos to board members and to key people. So it's better to have as much as you can at the fingertips that's in a paper format or some sort of digital format that's easy to print out and hand to older board members who maybe aren't into the digital phase. If you do have a video and you feel it's compelling, and we did have a grantee who had a very compelling video that was put with their grant application, ask the funder first and make sure that it's okay to submit that with your application. And in that case, we simply presented that video at our committee meeting. We didn't forward the link along. So those are that's pretty much the meat of what you're going to have as far as appendices or attachments. So then moving on, the next thing that you're going to need to put with this, once you get it all packaged up and tied neatly, you'll need a cover letter. And your cover letter should be very brief, and I'm talking 2 to 3 paragraphs. You want it to be just an introduction. Just briefly, what is your organization? So your executive summary, pare it down even more. Like you want this to be just simply an introduction about your organization. If you have talked to somebody at the foundation, to the location where you're applying, include that in your cover letter as well. Briefly highlight the proposal, anything that's important. And then your last paragraph should thank the funder for considering the request. Clearly indicate who the funder should contact with questions. Don't put your executive director here if you are the one that they need to contact for questions, and your executive director is going to get 9 million emails and just glaze over, an email that's coming, or maybe doesn't even know that you've applied to this foundation for funding. Make sure that whoever you put there as far as contact information knows that there may be something coming from that foundation, and that the person who's receiving that email is the appropriate person to answer the questions, because there's no time on a funder's part for passing emails to other individuals. So if your funder reaches out to the contact person, and then the contact person says, oh, really, you need to reach out to this person, now you've totally disconnected yourself from the funder, because they don't have time. So make sure you've got the right information there. And typically the person who signs the cover letter should be your executive director or your board president, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the person that they're contacting, okay? Also, you can invite them to a phone call, or a Zoom meeting, or to come to visit your location in your cover letter. That's fine to do that. And then I'll send everybody a sample cover letter, and you'll see it's not the most perfect cover letter, obviously. There are some things that I would do differently with it, but I'll send it out to you, and it just simply is to the president of XYZ Foundation. In the first paragraph, on behalf of the board of directors and staff, I'm honored to submit the following proposal requesting consideration of a grant for $25,000 to Swim for Life to assist us in expanding, the program. And then to me, the first sentence in this sample cover letter is a little long. I probably would break it up, but still, it's only a couple paragraphs in length. And then, they go on to say the program is an innovative swimming instruction program established by a former U.S. Olympic swimming hopeful and hometown hero. Therefore, that's why it's innovative. So, you're kind of backing up any of those words. And then the next paragraph, that was established in 2008. So you have now set, kind of a lend credibility to the program. Talks a little bit about the mission of the organization to empower youth in underserved communities throughout the county, utilize the discipline of swimming to improve physical fitness. More than 450 youth have participated since the operations began. There's your statistic that's compelling. And then the very last paragraph, because of your commitment to encouraging young people, we hope that your foundation will join us as our partner. Remember, they're your partner, not a funder, in this program. And should you have questions, call me and your phone number if you're the one signing that and you're the proper contact person. If not, I would put here, please feel free to contact our program manager, such and such a person, at email. Make sure you put email and phone number. A lot of foundations prefer email now. And then obviously, we deeply appreciate your consideration of our request and look forward to hearing from you. And in September, if not before, that means that you, as the writer of this letter, have done your homework, and that they're around, that things will be decided in December. So that's really all you need, very brief, because your grant application, your executive summary is going to be the next thing that they probably see. And then it's going to take that cover letter and expand upon it, to the point where now they know, exactly about your program. So it's more just like a little teaser. So then putting it all together, cover letter obviously goes on top. And then your cover page, if the grantee or if the funder requires it, some funders don't. even want a cover letter on there or a cover page. If they want a cover page, what usually is on it is the contact information for the organization, the contact information for the person who is writing the grant, and contact information for whoever it is that you would want, a person to contact. So really what you're doing with that cover page is simply putting the information right in front of the funder of who you need to contact. And, you can put the program, the organization's name and the program name. Usually there's a date on it. The next piece is usually the executive summary. Usually the funder will then request the other items to be placed in a particular order. So make sure that you're looking at your funder's instructions and you're following them to the T. And then the proposal should be neat and clutter-free. Make sure there's no typos or very few typos. Headings should be clear. Pages should be numbered, especially because a lot of times your funders, like I said, are taking these applications apart and giving certain pages to certain board members. And so you're making it easier for them when they look at your application, say, okay, page 2 and 3 are going to this particular board member. Page 4 and 5 are going to this particular board member. So page numbers do help. And then if it's by email, you really should take the time to PDF everything in order and label it separately. Like if you're sending separate PDFs, sometimes the funders request that. They would say, we want the budget as a separate PDF, just so that they can send off the budget without having to pull it out of the grant application and scan it in, or do whatever they need to do. So some of them will request that you PDF each piece separately. And if you do that, make sure you number them in the order that they want them. And then make sure that the proposal follows the specifications set forth by the grant maker. Usually it's held together simply with a paper clip or a binder clip if you're sending it by mail. Please don't put it in a folder or go to Staples and have it bound unless the funder specifically says to do that. And that's, like I said, again, because the funder is usually taking it apart and sending it to different people. So the easier you can make it for them, the better. Once your proposal's together, print out your guidelines, print out your proposals, and send it to someone else to read. And I can't stress to you how important that is. And I did it all the time. If they can look at the guidelines from the grant maker and follow your proposal and then tell you what you're asking for, then you've done your job. And if they have questions, then you haven't done your job. You need to address the questions further. Almost all funders are going to ask for at least a few attachments, usually the 501c3 letter, most often a list of board members and affiliations, the overall budget for the organization, latest annual report. Those are mostly the things that are asked for. Make sure that you put those in order in your appendices. So then I have a couple of slides that you guys will enjoy. Pet peeves from funders. I'm not going to read them all word for word because obviously you can all read. But some of the ones, I like the first one. I sometimes read a proposal and I can't see where it's going. And we have had this happen here at Buhl Regional Health Foundation. We had it happen at UPMC Foundation. So make sure that your proposal is clear. Make sure that it has direction. Make sure that you start with an outline so that you keep yourself on track so that the reader can see where it's going. And then the next one, actually the next one down, the amazing lack of statistics included in proposals. And when they are included, they're dated and out of context. And we talked about this at length. Make sure that your statistics are the latest that you can find, and make sure that they're pertinent to your project. You're not just throwing statistics in there to throw them in. Don't include them just to include them. And then, frankly, I don't care how many widget you make. I only care if the widgets made a difference. And that is, that's something that a lot of funders truly, a lot of organizations seem to get stuck with this. They think that you just want the numbers, but the funders really want to see that the project is making a difference, not necessarily just number of people affected. And so without, going on and on, just simply putting a few of those statements in there that show the impact will definitely help the funder to see kind of beyond the statistics. I hate when a grant application does not show funding diversity. I can't tell you how many times we hear this in our grant committee meetings. Our grant committee members want to see, when they're reviewing a grant application, that you have diversified your funding sources, that you have shown sustainability, you don't have all of your funding eggs in one basket. Show them multiple sources of sustainable funding for your project. And, we don't want to be looked at, we as funders don't want to be looked at as simply an ATM. We want to be looked at as a partner. We want to be looked at as someone who's going to help you get this off of the ground. You're going to have some wonderful outcomes for us. But then, hey, look, we're pulling funding from here, here, and here also, not just, from Buhl Regional Health Foundation. This one said, I loathe the blah, blah, blah syndrome. Just tell us what you plan to do with the money. Avoid the fluff, avoid the jargon, be clear, be concise. And then not slipping something into your proposal that we said we won't fund. And this is very true. Funders will stop reading. As soon as you have slipped something in there and, we know that they don't fund this, but we're going to try anyway. That's it. I mean, you truly lose credibility with us. So if the funder says they're not going to fund it, don't put it in there. Or, if it's a piece of the program that that is required and it's being funded by somewhere else, put that in there so that we can see that you truly have read what we will fund and you've reached out to other partners to pull the whole thing together. And then obviously invest in those grammar books and use your spell check, use the little tips. Like I said, I read my sentences backwards, sometimes just so that I'm looking at words, not at, the context. So then the next page, just some suggestions from multiple funders. And this came from a couple different books. I pulled quotes, back when I was, doing the very first grant writing class. I was reading a lot of different grant writing books and pulled these suggestions from multiple sources. And again, I'm not going to sit here and read them all. I hate when somebody sits and reads a slide. So, but most important, showing us measurable objectives. We want to see that our funding is making a difference, and we want to see how we can prove to our board and our community that funding your program makes a difference. And always keep in mind, we as funders want you to succeed in your program. We don't want you, we're not here to watch you fail. And so when you're stumbling along the way, or you're running into a couple of those roadblocks that you're going to hit, call us, talk to us. A lot of times we have board members or staff members who have been there, who have experienced what you're experiencing, and we can help you through it, or we can give you direction or guidance. So, we don't want to have, a 12-month grant period come to an end, and at 12 months you say, well, the program failed. Well, why didn't you reach out to us 4 months in when you saw the program was not working the way you wanted to, and ask us if we had any guidance for you, ask us if you have support. It is not failure in our eyes if you reach out to us and say, hey, we've hit this, we need some help. Do you have any ideas? Make your letter of inquiry. I think this is a good one. Make it start with a little grabber, a compelling story, a startling fact. There was the first time that I taught this class, there was a commercial on the radio that I used. And it was something along the lines of every 30 seconds, an elephant is, poached for its tusks. Like, what? Every 30 seconds, an elephant is poached for its tusks. Like that's a grabber. That's an attention getter, a showstopper. If you have a little startling fact like that you can put at the beginning of your LOI, just kind of pulls that funder in and says, wow, gee, that's an interesting stat. I wonder what they're going to do about that. I wonder what the action is that they're going to address in this application. So then the next slide, we'll talk a little wee bit about those terrible electronic submissions. Back when I first started grant writing, everything was by paper. And, you might have, word limits. You had to do your, your word check, on Word or something like that. But when we started moving to electronic submissions, I think I wrote my first electronic submission maybe 10 years ago. And I think it was probably the hardest thing that I had to do as a grant writer was to move from being able to pretty much write freely and creatively and write with heart to moving towards, oh my gosh, I have to put this in 1,000 characters or less. And it won't let you go past 1,000 characters or less. Whereas before you could sneak in a couple extra sentences and the funder wouldn't say anything. But the electronic submissions have made it really difficult, I think, as grant writers. And I always say, I lucked out. The first grant that I ever wrote, it was a paper grant, and it was written to a state agency, and it was to start a nonprofit watershed group in our area. And I really feel it was the first grant I ever wrote, and it was the first grant that I ever got funded. So I was one of those really lucky, grant writers. I honestly can say that grant was not funded because I had the skills that I needed to write the grant. That grant was funded because I had the heart in what I was writing. So you as the grant writer have to now, with these electronic submissions, try and figure out how to keep the heart in your writing and keep it concise to, sometimes 1,000 characters or less. And, it's difficult. When you first get your login, make sure that as the grant writer, you log in immediately and you start to read over the questions. What I used to do is copy the question and then put in parentheses next to it the number of characters, put that into a Word document, and then write, and then start to pare down my writing, to get to that word limit. Please do not log in on the same day that the proposal is due, because you may run into, your password doesn't work, or, the funder's portal is down, or your login isn't correct, and you need to reach out to your funder. So make sure that you log in plenty of time. I mean, you should be, as soon as you've decided that you're applying to this funder, you should be logging in and setting up all of your information. And then obviously making sure your answers all fit within the specified character limits before the day that you're submitting the application. And then, I usually would just copy everything, place it in the word processing document, log out, And then a lot of times I wouldn't touch it again until maybe 3 weeks before the proposal was due. But before you log back in, make sure that you get everything assembled, your legal name, make sure that you are using the organization's legal name. If you are an organization that is umbrellaed under another organization, you're going to want to make sure that you have the legal name of the organization through which you're applying. And that's because with these electronic submissions, a lot of times the funder is automatically linking your organization's legal name to GuideStar or to some other database, so that they can automatically pull 990 information and look at past financial information and things like that. So if you don't have the correct legal name there, and you wait until the last minute to do it, you might run into some problems. So that's why I always say at least a couple weeks before this submission is due, you want to log back in, you want to make sure your password works, you want to make sure you start to upload the documents that you need to upload. Make sure that the address matches what's on your articles of incorporation. Make sure that mailing addresses are correct, contact person is correct, telephone numbers, EIN numbers, DUNS numbers if you need it, budget information that is recent. Make sure that you have everything at your fingertips when you log back in. And then keep in mind too that the portal might log you out after so many minutes. So if you are logged in and you're starting to maybe cut and paste things, and all of a sudden you get called away, when you come back, that portal may have logged you out. So nothing is worse than getting in there, cutting and pasting something in, reading it and being like, oh, I didn't write that right, I'm going to change it. And then you get a phone call and then you come back and it's logged out. And it was lost. Everything was lost because it wasn't saved. So I always tell people, make sure that if you are in the middle of cutting and pasting into digital portals, that you're constantly hitting that save button, especially before you go to take a phone call. Get into the habit of hitting save after you upload everything, anything in particular. If you make a change, hit save, because it really stinks to have that happen. Review as much of that e-grant template as you can. Take a lot of notes. Can you work on the application and save it? That is it. Every funder is different. I think our Buhl Regional Health Foundation, you can go in and you can go in and work on it and save it, and without submitting it, and come back and work on it more and save it. And I've had other funders. There was a funder out of Washington, D.C., and I didn't realize that I was just kind of going to go in and work on it as I could. And I hit what I thought was save, and it was submit, and it wasn't anywhere near done. And I had to call the funder and admit that I had not read the instructions properly and that I had accidentally submitted it too early. Well, they didn't have an option where you could come in and work on it a little bit at a time. So make sure that you get in there, you're familiar with the way they do things, you're familiar with their template. Stop your writing at about 50 characters, less than what is allowed. And that was something that one of my teachers told me, a while back, because, so like when you're in your Word document and you're doing your writing, unless, like I said, you get it done and you're, 500 words less, that's fine. But don't be trying to take it all the way out to the limit. Give yourself like that 50 word leeway, so that when you do cut and paste it into the application, and you go in and you're starting to review everything, if you need to make some little changes, you've got a little bit of leeway to do that. Or, you need to make something sound like, maybe you've got multiple pieces coming from multiple people, and you need to try and smooth over the language and make it all sound like it was written by one person. That gives you a little bit more, space. than having to take it all the way out to the end and then trying to figure things out at the last minute. Most likely, you're not going to be able to attach graphs or charts in electronic submissions. I really can't even think of a foundation that I applied to that asked for graphs or charts. So this is where you're going to have to describe that information in like a narrative. So, keeping it plain, keeping it simple. Also, you are not going to be able to do like your special formatting, if you like to, maybe use a different font to draw attention to certain words. A lot of that is lost in your electronic submissions. Even bold and italics, underlining, font colors, all of that usually is lost when you have an electronic submission. And if not, it's almost always lost when the funder prints out what you have submitted. So try and draw attention to different parts of your application without using bold or italic or underlining or things like that. If you can, and this, I don't even know if this is legit anymore, maybe somebody else can tell me, but at one point they were telling us to convert your text to RTF format before you paste it into an online portal, because you can sometimes prevent issues that might come up with Word and an interface with that HTML, web page. I don't know whether, this was probably 6 years ago that I was told this. So, Word and, some of the Apple document software and things might have already, done updates to fix this. But, I do remember a lot of times trying to cut and paste into a portal, and like commas would be gone or periods would be gone, or, like sentences would all run together. You'd have little weird characters put in there. And it was a real pain in the butt. So sometimes converting that to an RTF format might help with that. The other tip would be to recheck that website often, especially if you are, like if you've logged on and you've got maybe, wouldn't it be wonderful to have 3 to 6 months to write a grant application? Usually you don't. But if you have an extended period of time to be able to write that application, make sure that you're going back and rechecking the website, you're logging in. Sometimes funders will put notifications on there about slight changes to the application or to the guidelines, and you don't want to log on the day that you're submitting the request, especially submitting the request on the day that it's due, and find out that certain formats have changed, or oh wow, now all of a sudden we want our budget put into this spreadsheet instead of you uploading your own spreadsheet. So just keep checking back, and then confirm the due date and the time zone. And this happened to me a few times when I was applying to funders that were in the Midwest for a program that is here, and there was a time difference. Thankfully, I was never one of those ones that was hitting submit at like 11:59 on an application that was due at midnight. But if you are one of those people, make sure that you're looking at the right time zone for that submission. I always submitted the proposal at least 2 days ahead of time. And that is just because you never know if the system's going to be working properly, if your system is going to be working properly. Technology is known to pick the most inopportune times to fail, and you don't want it to fail when you're hitting submit at a deadline. So the next slide is just briefly touching on federal funding applications. Like I said, I am not a federal grant writer. This slide was actually given to me by the people who write the grants for Primary Health Network. And they do a lot of federal funding applications. And so I'm not going to read word for word, but I can tell you that attention to detail is extremely important in the federal funding applications. If you have something as minor as you used the wrong font size, or you double spaced instead of single spaced, that application can be kicked out just right there. They won't even go any further. A lot of times federal grants do offer webinars that explain the grant application details. And a lot of times you can find through those webinars an actual person. So if you're on, a federal funding site and you're clueless about something, look for the webinars that explain things. And even if it's not something that's explaining exactly what your question is, a lot of times when you get to the end of that explanation, there will be a person that you can contact. And that's kind of the way to get your foot in the door, to kind of weasel in with, somebody at the federal level. I know when I wrote some state grant applications that, first of all, the attention to detail was definitely important. But I know that a few of the webinars, they actually required you to watch the webinar. And it didn't matter whether you had, applied to them 2 years ago and the webinar was the exact same webinar. You literally had to sit there, watch the entire webinar. You're doing whatever, working on whatever, and, hit yes that you had watched the webinar before they'll even allow you to move on into the application process. But the nice thing about that webinar was I gained connections at the state level, for different grants that I was writing through DCNR or DCED. And then also check with our local officials, the different state representatives, the state senators, county officials. If you're writing federal applications, state applications, oftentimes it's good to have a letter of support from your state representative or, somebody, from the state level, from the local level. And it's nice to kind of put the bug in their ear so that if they do happen to be, like Michelle Brooks is on, I think she's on the tourism board. And, we submitted a grant application for, part of our water trail many years ago. And so we put the bug in her ear and Park Wentling's ear and said, hey, we're submitting this grant application. Well, when the application came across the state house floor or the state Senate floor, they knew about it and they were able to comment on it. So it's good to keep your congressmen and your state and local officials up to date on what you're doing, especially when you're applying for federal funding, because they can keep their ears open and kind of watch what committee it might be going through and put the bug in that committee chair's ear for you. Next slide. Unfortunately, that's all I can tell you about federal funding because that's not my forte. So we will talk a little bit about what to do if you don't get the grant. And keep in mind that a typical foundation, I think we already talked about this, is only really going to make grants to about 8 to 10% of the requests that it receives. So there's going to be hundreds of times, I shouldn't say hundreds, there's going to be many times that you submit grant applications. The first time around, you are not going to get funded. Like I said, the first time around that I wrote one and got funded, I didn't realize how awesome that was because the next several that I wrote, I didn't get funded. So, you have to have thick skin as a grant writer. There's going to be tons of organizations submitting grant applications that you're up against. And it doesn't mean that your grant wasn't the greatest offer to them. It simply was that they had something else that was more of a priority at the time. On average, the declination letter that you receive is going to be extremely general. Like it's simply going to say, You know, that your proposal was not chosen at this time. Thank you for your submission. It's not going to give you reasons. You know, unless you didn't do your homework and you're not within the geographical, you know, area that they serve, or, you know, your organization isn't the type of organization that they would fund, then that usually is very specific in that letter, but usually it's general. And so the best thing for you to do then is to make a phone call. And I can tell you, we don't mind those phone calls here at Buhl Regional Health Foundation. But we do mind the phone calls that are, why didn't you fund us? You know, we had a great program and it was blah, blah, blah. Why didn't you fund us? We want the phone calls that start with, thank you so much for taking the time to review our application. You know, we're sorry that we weren't a good fit at this time, but do you have any suggestions for us? Is there something that we might have done differently in our proposal? Was there some part of the guideline that we didn't meet? Is there, you know, a tip that you could give us to help us fit in a little better? Was additional clarity needed in like the portion of the program, or in, you know, a different piece of the grant proposal? Was there something that we might have been able to do differently to make it more competitive with the organizations that you did fund? Also ask them, is it okay if we submit another proposal? And they might say, yeah, sure, but you have to wait 18 months. Or they might say, yeah, sure, you can submit in the next round. And they might say, yeah, sure, you could submit again. And we really liked this part of your proposal. We really liked this piece of the program. If you could find another funder that might fund this piece, you know, a different piece of the program, we would be more likely to fund, you know, the part that we really like about your program. These conversations are where you truly learn to be a good grant writer, is when you get declined. I learned so much more from those declination phone calls than I did by, you know, just simply reading the funding guidelines and, you know, just, you know, submitting. Another question to always ask is, do you know of any other funders who might support this type of program? You know, we know you didn't fund us, but do you know of others in the area or others who support this type of program that we might reach out to? And then always ask them for suggestions on, you know, how you could strengthen the program, how you could strengthen the proposal. Sometimes you're just not a good fit. And like I said, you have to have thick skin. You had a great idea, you explained it well, it just wasn't right for that funder at that time. And I have had multiple times where I've written, you know, a grant application. When I looked at the funder's website, it was a great fit. And, you know, I wrote the application, I submitted it for the round that I thought, you know, it should be submitted for. And then I got the declination letter and I went back and I looked at their website, they had changed their focus. And, you know, it's not even a shame on you type of, you know, scenario. It's simply things change so quickly in the funding world, especially now, that, you know, you might spend weeks on a grant application and get it submitted, and it just simply was not a good fit or guidelines had changed. Sometimes a program manager, when you call and ask, they'll say, you know what, there wasn't enough substance to your grant application. There wasn't enough meat to it. We really would have liked more statistics on XYZ. So, you know, make sure that that you're reaching out and you're taking notes, because the next time around or the next funder around, then you can add that into your application. Another thing would be if your writing wasn't clear. So specifically, you know, ask them, you know, do you think that my proposal was written clearly? And did you understand it? Because there's a lot of times where I have actually, reached back out to an organization and said, well, we really like this program, but you need to really clarify this section because we were lost by the time we got through the first 3 sentences. If you don't ask, the funder's not going to tell you. The more feedback you get, the easier it is for you to go with proceed with your next grant application. If you get warm remarks, positive comments, then you know you're on the right track with the right funder. If an officer says to go ahead and submit again, definitely ask for timing. See if there are any changes that you should make up front. And then please always write a thank you note. Always. And I know everybody loves to shoot an email, gee, thanks. A true handwritten thank you note in the mail means a lot. It really does. Even if you don't get the grant, just taking the time to say, we really appreciated that you took the time to speak with me about why our application was declined. That thank you note will kind of sit on the desk for a couple of weeks. And then the next time your proposal is sitting in front of those program officers, they're going to remember that thank you note. They're going to remember it coming in the mail, opening it, and the nice statements that were made in it. Much more than they're going to remember an email. Continue to build your relationship. If they say yes, we love the program, we'd like you to apply again, but maybe you can't apply for 18 months. That doesn't mean you just drop them for 18 months. If you have a newsletter, send them a newsletter or ask them if they would like to receive your newsletter. Every once in a while, reach out to them and say, hey, we have this, such and such a program going on. We'd love if you could stop in and meet some of our, most likely they're going to say, gee, thanks, but sorry, I can't. But every time that you're connecting with them, you're keeping your organization in their face. Don't overconnect. That would be the other thing. And, people have asked, well, what is overconnecting? What is underconnecting? Overconnecting is like weekly, like something weekly. And we have had, grantees do that. And you finally just, thank you so much. We'll keep you in mind. And we're trying to kind of, okay, get the picture that weekly is too much. If it's an 18-month period, monthly might be too much. But maybe every 3 months, every 2 to 3 months, just touching base, especially if you have a great project going on, that is supplemental to what you're going to ask them for. And you could say, hey, we've got this going on and, we think that, if we apply to you again for funding, this is going to be a big piece of it. And we want you to see how wonderful it is. Continue to build that relationship. Add them to your mailing list. Like I said, newsletters are great. Email newsletters are wonderful, but continue to share your successes with them. So now you got the grant. That's, first of all, congratulations. And take a few minutes to celebrate, but don't wait too long because now it's time to get to work. Again, writing a heartfelt thank you note immediately. One of the rules that I had when I was kind of running Shenango River Watchers, we had an office assistant who was new and she was kind of getting her feet wet in even, how to run, hold an organization together. And my rule was if you get a donation, 48 hours later, within 48 hours, a thank you needs to go out the door. And it should not just be, it can be a typewritten thank you letter, but you've got to handwrite something on it, not just your signature. Handwritten, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Your support, or we're so excited to partner with you. One sentence and, a form letter with one sentence handwritten on it. And true ink on it, not, something that was printed out on the computer, is really important. It really is still, even in this digital world. Next thing you want to do is make sure that you complete your contract or your paperwork immediately. There is nothing worse than when we reach out to a grantee and say, or a scholarship recipient, hey, you've been awarded this, and then we don't hear back from them. We don't hear back from them for weeks. And the day the contract is due, all of a sudden you get a signed contract, and that's it. It's like, next time around, we're going to rethink that maybe. So make sure that you right away respond to the funder and right away get your paperwork completed as soon as you can. And if it's going to take you time, maybe you don't have the right person, available to sign something, let the funder know that you received the information, that you got the grant, that you're excited about the grant, and that you will get back to them as soon as possible with, the contract and the paperwork that needs done. Make sure that it's signed by the correct person. If the grantor says this has to be signed by your executive director, don't sign it as, the grant writer, or as, like the program manager. Get it in front of the executive director and get it signed. Grantees don't want to have to, or grantors don't want to have to chase you down for anything, and many will not. And we actually have organizations who, never completed a 6-month report. We had 2 emails that go out, and reminder, your 6-month report is due in 3 weeks. Reminder, your 6-month report is due next week. If you don't get it in, don't expect that the funder is going to fund you again for your next project that you have. So make sure that you get everything done by the due date. If you don't, many will simply not award you the money. Then I always established a file for the grant, either a paper file or a digital file, and then keep everything related to that particular grant in the file, including a copy of the contract, the contact info for the grantor, and then once I got moved into digital, anytime I sent an email or anything to the grantor, I copied that and placed it in that file so that I had a paper trail or digital trail of what I had sent when. Then call a meeting with all of the staff and partner organizations who are responsible for that program, and then review that grant application with them, because they may have forgotten about it. You might be finding out about a grant award 6 months after you submitted the grant. So bring everyone back up to speed. Here's what the goals were. Here's what the objectives were. Here's the methods. Here's the timeline. Has anything changed? And if it has changed, you as the grant writer or the person that's submitting this grant, the reporting, has to know immediately, so that you can go straight back to the funder and say, hey, look, that was 6 months ago that we submitted this. This has changed. We found that, we'd rather do it this way than the way we submitted. Are you okay with that? But make sure that you get those details hammered out immediately when you realize that you've gotten the grant. Also reviews any of the rules and the regulations that come from the grantor. What happens if you need to change something? What controls do you need to put in place to be able to meet the guidelines that the grantor has? And then the award letter usually outlines further expectations once the proposal has been approved. Call an email or send a letter to the funder immediately, but try and touch base. Thank them heartfeltly. And then some funders are going to provide you with whatever language you need to use if you're referring to the grant in public. Please make sure that you ask your funder if it's okay to use their name in public materials as a funder. Some funders don't want to be thanked publicly. They simply want that nice thank you note from you. They want to know they're making a difference, but they don't want their name out in the community. There's several little local family foundations here in our community that give decent amounts of funding to organizations, you would never know they exist because their name is never in the paper. They don't want it in the paper. They simply want to know they're making a difference. The worst thing you can do, well, I shouldn't say it's the worst thing you can do, but it would be pretty bad if you thanked a funder publicly and they didn't want their name in the paper. I always said a press release should go out, within a couple weeks. If your organization, received, a $15,000 grant from funder XYZ, immediately get with the funder. Are you okay with us using your name? Are you okay with us, talking about that you are funding this project? What language would you like us to use? Are you okay with us sending a press release? And if the funder, wants the press release sent, a lot of times they'll, give you the language that they would like in it, referring to them. And then, making sure that you let the funder know exactly where that was sent. Did you send it to the Sharon Herald, the Record Argus? Maybe it was sent out on Facebook, things like that, because the funder, if they do want their name attached to it, they want their name attached to it. So if you're putting something out on Facebook, they want to link to that and they want to share it. They want to share it on their social media. They want to share it on LinkedIn. They want to do whatever they can to have their name attached with that program. And if you have partner organizations, don't forget that you need to notify them of the grant. And then if they're contributing something to the success of the grant, then you need to make sure that you're all on the same page. Who's responsible for what? And then also, do they want their names, in a press release and, attached to this program? And then obviously announcing it, to everyone in the community. Let your funders, thank your funders publicly, and make sure that you get it right. Shout it from the rooftops, make a big splash if your funder wants it, but do it right. So managing the grant, oh, we're there. Okay. Oftentimes the individual who wrote the grant is the one that has to manage the grant. Welcome to the world of grant writing. So how do you organize yourself to manage one grant, much less multiple grants? And if you have partner organizations that are conducting different aspects of the project, make sure you're with them immediately and you lay out a plan as to how you're going to expend the funds over the course of the grant period. Is this a grant where all the funds are expended up front and then the program is going on and you've got different partners providing, different measurables to you? Or is this something where, you have to spend monthly or quarterly, and, making sure that your partners know when their piece of the funding needs to be spent and how they need to report it to you? Or, maybe they're going to assume the role of the reporting, but making sure that somebody knows who is the one that is in charge of the reporting. Ideally, each grant should be set up as its own cost center. All income from a particular grant then is accounted for in distinct categories as expenditures, and they're accounted against that line in your budget. And then this helps to protect against commingling of funding in like one big pot, and then losing track of what money was paid for what expenses. So I think I talked about this a little bit before. Like, I had a folder for each grant, and then I divided the folder into sections. And I had like a copy of the executed grant agreement at the front of the folder. And then the next thing that I had was the goals and the objectives and the methods and the timeline. And then the next divider I had was a copy of the grant budget. And then I also set that up as a spreadsheet, and I had it, calculate automatically so that I, like I said, it's its own cost center. And as I added invoices to it, it would draw down on the amount that I had in each category. Then I had a folder for invoices, and then any mileage that was spent on the project. There were a lot of funders that required you to actually have the Google map, copy of the Google map that showed exactly address where you started, address where you, for instance, we were delivering medical equipment to individuals who couldn't get to our facility. And I literally had to have their address. And then I would have to cross out a portion of it because you didn't want to give too much personal information. And then, mileage back as well. Time spent on the projects by employees if the grant is paying for salary. And then any correspondence with the funder was another folder. And then if there was reporting required, I had, like a big dry erase board, and I had all of my grants listed on that dry erase board with a timeline. Okay, I know these quarterly reports are due in January, March, and so on. These midterm reports are due, I might have one due in October, another due in January, and then, your final reports. It's extremely important to remember those reporting deadlines. Especially, I had a grantor that required a monthly report. And the monthly report had to be submitted within 3 days of the end of the month. And so, you don't want to miss and submit it 5 days. You want to make sure that you're submitting your reports in a timely manner. Organize them, ensure the grants, ensure that you understand what you're supposed to be tracking for each grant, and do it, like I said, immediately when you're awarded the grant. Spend the time right at the beginning to clearly get everything defined, and do it right up front so that you're not caught off guard when the first report is due. Tracking your spending is very important. Work closely with whoever your finance person is to ensure that you're spending properly throughout the grant cycle. If you don't have a finance reporter or person that's reporting to you and you're the one doing it, set yourself some deadlines. Don't wait until the first report is due and then try and spend the appropriate amount of funds that you were supposed to spend, because your funder is going to think you're disorganized and they might not fund you again. Some grants are offered on a reimbursement basis, so it's really important for you to know that up front. Have a system in place to track those receipts. Other funders might give you 50% up front and ask for periodic reporting to show that you're on track before they give you the rest. Keep in mind, funders are going to want to see proof that you spent the funding appropriately. So, not just, hey, I spent this on this, but literally, here's the receipt, here's the invoice for what I spent it on. If all the receipts are dated like 2 weeks before your final report is due, then the funder is going to question, well, did they even implement this project? So make sure that you're spending appropriately. Only expend the funds that you laid out in your proposal that was approved by the funder. Don't try and sneak other things in there. And this is a huge no-no. Never use funds from a grant for purposes other than what was described in the grant application. You might get away with it with small foundation funders, but don't try to get away with it. And you will never get away with it with state or federal funding. I can tell you that for sure. In addition, if you're managing multiple grants, this is also extremely important. Don't double dip. It could be tempting, but don't use an invoice for an item that you purchased with one grant to support the purchase of the same item with a different grant. And it, I know it can be very tempting. I actually left a place, stopped writing grants for a place that I was working for because they asked me to do this. As the grant writer, you have to maintain transparency, and you have to just be ethical about what you're doing. Do not double dip. And keep in mind too that funders, especially in our community, will talk to each other. So if you're caught doing this, you might end up having to return your entire grant amount to both funders. So if you have to make changes to your budget, because, okay, well, I got 2 grants and they're for the same thing. Reach out to your funder and say, okay, look, I'm in a really great position here. Can I use your money for this? And I'll use this money for this. And, a lot of times funders will say, yes, that would be wonderful, or we'll get more bang for our buck. Just make sure that you do that. Okay. Grant makers are grant makers because they support the work that you're doing in the community. Like I said, they want you to succeed. So when you do succeed, let them know. And they want to know that they're a part of something that has been impactful. So make sure that you keep awards and articles, different announcements that were made. Share them with your funder, either during your reporting, or like I said, shoot them an email. Hey, just wanted you to see, we were in the paper, and here's the progress of and here's some pictures. Or there is nothing better as a funder to get a thank you in the mail that is completely and totally unexpected, that has a picture in it of, for instance, a kid participating in, one of your programs that you have funded. It's so rewarding as the funder to get those little tidbits and to know that you're making a difference. So make sure that you develop that close relationship with your funder, and that you can send them these articles and pictures and things like that right away, and let them relish in your success with you. If you're receiving an award at a ceremony, invite your funder to join you. And we did this with Shenango River Watchers. We received a state award that we had to drive down to Pittsburgh and go to this fancy dinner, and they gave us this really neat award. And one of our funders was Joy Cone, and we actually invited Mr. George and his wife Ruth Ann to come with us, thinking, oh, they'll never come, and they actually came. And they actually, through that award dinner, gained a whole new appreciation for what our organization was doing locally. So if you can share events like that with your funders, at least ask them. They might say, oh, gee, sorry, but they will appreciate that you thought of them. If you're tracking multiple grants over the course of multiple cycles, you might need to invest in some sort of grant tracking software. I have absolutely no idea what's out there anymore, because I haven't been doing the grant tracking for quite a while, but some of the products allow you to add other users into the database, so that you can set reminders for them and they can upload information for you or enter information directly. If you're doing this for a living, you're doing this for multiple organizations and multiple projects within multiple organizations, I would highly recommend looking into just something like that, because it is very important to stay organized. I always scheduled my reports immediately and stuck to the schedule. So as soon as I found out, that I was awarded a grant, I would look and say, okay, they require a quarterly report. Here's the date that is due. And then I would stick, something on my Outlook calendar a week prior, and, make sure that I was scheduling myself time to pull that report together. Block off time on your calendar to do it. Make sure that you schedule for yourself regular touches for the funder, so that you don't forget. And those could be, like I said, the brief emails letting them know that things are moving along, news articles, things like that. But I always had them scheduled so that they were in between reports. So if there was a quarterly report, maybe 6 weeks in, I would have like a little notification on my calendar that said, touch base with Gunda Foundation, or touch base with Margaret Walker Foundation. Just so that I knew, hey, it's been 6 weeks since they've heard from me. I'm going to shoot them a little email. Make sure, though, that you're respectful of them and their time. don't send them 6-paragraph emails. Just, a brief blurb and a picture is always something that is, appreciated. Generally, grant reporting includes some of the following things. First of all, a financial overview. It's the same slide, Jess. Sorry.
That's all right.
Explain the status of the grant and the expenditures to date and the funds remaining. And then update the funder as to the status of the implementation. Where are you within the timeline? Are you at the proper spot in the timeline where you should be? If not, why not? And then what are some of the outcomes and successes that you have done to date? And then if there's any change of plans, obviously our 6-month report, I believe, asks if you're on target to complete the project on time. And if not, what changes do you need to make? And then what have been some of the challenges and did you expect them? And sometimes you don't have challenges and that's fine too. But don't just say we didn't have any challenges. You can say, things are going along as expected. Here's some of the things that, we thought we would touch on, but, don't just leave anything blank in your reporting. What is even better is if you've accomplished more than what you expected. So, if you're looking in, challenges and it's like, well, gee, we haven't had any challenges. We've actually overdone. Share that with us, share that with your funder. And then, obviously including attachments such as news articles, awards, pictures, statements from, people who have participated in the program. And then make sure that if you have partner organizations that you're including them in your reporting. Because you don't want to get to the final report and your partner organizations haven't been mentioned, in your 6-month report or quarterly reports. Managing the site visit. Funders on site visits are looking for a lot of different things. They might be asking questions to see how well maybe the director and the staff are working together. They're looking around to see whether or not they can see hints as to whether or not the organization is credible, whether or not the program is being understood by the people who are, completing tasks in the program, judging staff dedication to the program. How is the program director communicating with staff? I mean, we're looking at a lot of different things when we come out on a site visit. We're not just looking at, okay, I used your funding to buy this particular piece of equipment and here's how it works. We're looking around the whole organization to see what clues we can pick up on as to the credibility of what's going on within that organization. Yes, we know we bought you a piece of equipment and we know that the equipment works and we know you're taking care of people or you're putting numbers through. We know that wheelchair is going out to 6 different people. But we're watching the inner workings of how did that volunteer over there interact with that person that came in. That's what the importance of site visits are. And I can tell you as a funder, having to go to Zoom site visits was really difficult because you don't get to go to the program and really see kind of the inner workings of the program. We also will be looking around to see if we think the organization is properly staffed. So, if we're there on site and you see 6 kids have come through the door and there's only one person trying to control 6 kids and they're not having a really good time of it, then, that's kind of a clue to us that maybe you don't have all your ducks in a row with, what you're trying to do. Shows us what your track record is and, do you have the ability to expand to meet further needs if they should come about? We like to look around and see whether or not we see places where you've thought outside the box, where something is being done innovatively, if that's a word. Is the board active? Are some of your board members there for a site visit? Are they excited about what you're there for? Is your space effectively utilized? If we walk in and there's like a huge blank area not being used, then you're kind of scratching your head like, well, wonder why they have 3 desks in here when, they could probably divide this up, have the desks at the front and use the back part for programming. Why are we paying for programming space when they have programming space right here? So, we're not just there just to, put on a happy face and come in and meet and greet. We're really there looking around and getting a feel for the true organization. Make sure that you introduce everyone that's in your site visit meeting. Cut the small talk, a little bit of small talk at the beginning, beautiful day outside, whatever, but like get right to the meat of it, get down to business. Ask your funder questions. Like if they're just kind of standing there waiting for you to take the lead on the site visit, make sure that you have some questions ahead of time that you've thought that, would you like to see how, or, would you like to see the equipment process, how we clean the equipment, or how we, move the children through the program, or would you like to see the book we're using for, our literacy program, things like that. Usually the grantor will come in with a set specific list of questions that they want answered. And it's usually based on, whatever the grant was, obviously, that you asked for. Buhl Regional Health Foundation, I know I promised that this particular class would focus a little bit more on our process. We do our site visits prior to funding. At UPMC Foundation, we did our site visits after funding. So your funders even have different reasons for site visits. For Buhl Regional Health Foundation, our reason for that initial site visit is so that we can ask questions up front that our committee members had after reading your grant application, but prior to us making a decision on funding. So, if there are items within your grant application that need more clarity, then we will go ahead and ask those questions during our site visit. It's our opportunity as staff to ensure that we have all of the board members' questions answered prior to us going into that decision-making board meeting. At UPMC Foundation, our site visits were more because we wanted to make sure that the program was on track. So as a funder, we awarded the funding based on the grant application. Then usually 6 months later, we went for a site visit. I remember the first time I had a funder coming to me for a site visit, I was a nervous wreck. And don't be, because we're people too. We are, and we're there because we want to see the successes of the program. We're not there to catch you, in the middle of doing something wrong, or, worrying about, whether or not the floor is, clean when it's an art program where there should be paint on the floor. I mean, we're not there to inspect. We're there to get a feel for the program and how it's coming along. And like I said, there's little nuances that you kind of feel when you walk into an organization. Should you have food or not? That was one question that I was always asked. We've seen it both ways. If your funder is coming during a period of time that maybe would normally be lunch, ask the funder, would you like us to provide lunch for you during the site visit? Most likely they'll say, no, but could we bring something for you? Would you like us to bring a couple sandwiches, or how many people are there? We could bring soup, or, something along that lines. I always said, have some water, bottles of water available, coffee, offer coffee, tea, water. You don't need to worry about making sure you've got Panera sweet rolls laid out and a huge, the thing of fruit and stuff for us. Usually when a funder is coming for a site visit, they're not going to spend a whole heck of a lot of time sitting down and eating with you. They want to, come in, see what's going on, ask some questions, and then move on to their next site visit. So Don't be nervous about a site visit. Like I said, I was a nervous wreck. I was so nervous that I forgot the program manager's name and went to introduce my own program manager and couldn't get the name out. We don't want you to be nervous about this. We want to truly just be there and feel the program. If you can make arrangements for a site visit to happen while something is being done at the program, that is the most effective. So, for instance, like with Shenango River Watchers, a bridge for a trail, schedule a site visit when there's actually a group of scouts out there using the trail that you can, the grantor can come out and get a good feeling for the fact that the trail is being used, that the kids are enjoying it. If you have an art program, it does us no good to come and visit when there's nobody working on the art. Try and keep that timing in mind. And, especially if those site visits are site visits that are more for, we want to see how the program is going on. And I know at Buhl Regional Health Foundation, sometimes our site visit is simply to bring the big check and to get the photo up and to sit down and talk to you about here's what we expect from the reporting. That's kind of a different story. The funders that are coming for a site visit for that are more there just to get work done. But the ones that are coming, to really truly see the program, give them the full experience if you can. And then I promised that I would offer a little bit more insight into Buhl Regional Health Foundation's application process. We now have 6 pillars of, I guess you would say, focus areas that we're considering a priority. And so those include maternal health, education, which also includes like our scholarships, and community education. We have like a healthy lifestyle type of pillar. Trying to think, I know access to care is another one, and access to medical care, access to different programming. We have health equity as one of them, and maternal health. Did I already say that? Oh, and cancer initiatives. So if you've got programs that fit within some of those initiatives, then I would ask you to reach out to us and talk to us a little bit about your program. We have really done a lot to change our LOI process and our grant process. When I first started here, having been a grant writer, it took me a couple rounds of like reading the grants and going through LOI processes to realize where like the redundant questions were. Our LOI process now is simply, do you meet the requirements? Are you within the geographic area of Buhl Regional Health Foundation's footprint? And are you a 501c3 organization? Do you meet one of these pillars? Yes, that's it for eligibility, tax exempt status. And then we obviously, our foundation cannot support anyone that is participating in any sort of political lobbying. So we do have that as a question as well. And then we simply ask like your project name, a very brief project summary, and how much you're going to request. Then once we determine whether or not you fit within one of those pillars and our geographical footprint and you have a 501c3, if you meet all those requirements, then we will ask you to go ahead and submit a full application. There used to be some other steps in there and we've removed those steps now. We're simply looking for eligibility in our LOI now. If you're asked to submit a full application, there are a lot less questions than there were the first few times you may have submitted if you've submitted before. But we're going to ask how you fit within one of those pillars. What reasons led you to choose that pillar for your project, and how does that program fit within the pillar. We have very small character limits. Like a reason that you chose the pillar for which you chose 250 characters. I mean, we're not looking for a lot of fluff here. We're looking for concise language. A project summary with a character limit of 1,000. So, we're not looking for the fluff. Total project cost. So we want to know what is the cost of the project program as a whole, and then how much are you asking us for? If you're partnering with other organizations, we want to see who those collaborating partners are. And we have now decided we want to see what percent each partner is contributing towards that project or program. Also indicate if there's in-kind donations. Again, character limit for that is 500. So not looking for the fluff on that. If you have other partners that have letters of support, we do allow them to be uploaded to our application now. Use of funds, very briefly, what is the exact use of the funds? We don't want, 10 sentences here that kind of show that you're really not sure how exactly you're using the funds. If you're asking us for $15,000, what is the $15,000 used for specifically? Not looking for a budget here, just one sentence. What are you using the money for? And then a little bit about how your project or program is going to improve the health and well-being of our community. Obviously, we're a health foundation. So we're not going to be funding economic, you can twist and stretch pretty much anything into health, but I can tell you our grant committee is truly looking at health related, not looking at that economic impact, really looking at health types of projects. Sustainability is a big thing with Buhl Regional Health Foundation. We don't want you coming back year after year after year. We want to see that you've put the thought, the time and effort into a sustainable program without our funding. Our funding, we're happy to help you start it up. We don't want to be the sparkle. We want to be, one of the, maybe 4 funders that are coming together to pull this program off. We don't want to be the one funder that you're coming to for all of it. And then we want to see that you are going to be able to, continue the program, or maybe, it isn't a program that's going to be continued. It's just like, purchasing something that is going to be used forever. And that's wonderful too. But, we want to see that you have thought about how our funding will sustain, we'll start the project and how you will sustain it, moving forward. We do have a section that allows you to upload information, data, stories. It's not very big, 750 character limit or a 1 megabyte file size. But we want to hear those. We want to see, a little bit. We don't want the fluffiness, but we want a couple of those comments from individuals who feel that the program is going to be worthwhile. It's important for us to have, if the grant is funded, detailed, who do we make the check out to? And is that name the name that is on your 990, that is on your 501c3 letter? If it's not, there better be a good reason as to why it isn't. Maybe you're umbrellaed under that organization, and that's fine. But we for the IRS need to ensure that our check is actually going to a 501c3 organization. It can't be, be written to a program that is, under some sort of a 501c3. It has to be written to that organization. We do like to see a current annual operating budget. We talked about that in the budget class. And then we want to see a project budget. And within that project budget, then break it out the way I showed you, with the budget sample that I gave, where, okay, here's the column for Buhl Regional Health Foundation for what you're asking for from us, what lines those hit. And then here's the column for other funders, other funding, requests that we have made, and the amounts that have been asked, towards that. And then any other supporting documentation, we do want the 990 uploaded unless it's a church. We do want audited internal financial statements. If you don't have audited financial statements, then we want some sort of documentation indicating why. And like we talked about, I think it was in the first class, that can't be, well, we can't afford it. Well, we don't do an audited financial statement because we have a finance committee that reviews our financial statements on a quarterly basis, and here are the results of their review. Or, we have a committee that includes external individuals, who review our finances, and this is their report. And then we do ask for a list of board of directors. And then if your program has an advisory group, we would like to see that too. So we do look at the board. I know our grant committee will sit here and they'll look at that list of board of directors, and if they know someone, they'll, oh, I know this person. So your board of directors does lend credibility to your organization if you have people on there, who are known in the community. And if not, and we've had this with certain organizations where, maybe it's a national organization and they've come to us for funding, for a local program, but there's nobody on that national board, obviously, who is from our area. Then if you have an advisory board specific to that program that includes people from our area, then that's when you want to definitely include your advisory board. Because I can tell you that we did not fund the program that came to us, the national program that came to us, because nobody recognized any names on the board. There was no local person providing input into what was supposed to be a local program. So keep that in mind if you're writing grants for national organizations that are, implementing local projects. It's very important to have some sort of local guidance, either in an advisory capacity or serving on your board. Other than that, then the way our process works is you submit your grant application to us. And like I said, our grant committee, we have an exact deadline, and it's one of those, like, it has to be submitted by 11:59 on Friday night. And the reason for that is then our grant program director spends the next X number of days reviewing all of those applications for completeness. Simply, did they upload the 501c3? Do we have a copy of, everything that's supposed to be attached? Was everything filled out for completeness? Then once that review is done, the applications, and sometimes if you did not submit something that you were supposed to submit, there's enough time for that program director to reach out to you and say, hey, I saw you forgot to upload this. Would you mind getting it to me within the next few hours or the next day? If that happens to you with any organization, with any funder, make sure that you do it immediately, because a lot of times the grant program directors or the staff who are pulling this information together for the board are under tight timelines. So just because you've submitted everything and now you're not going to hear anything for 3 months doesn't mean that you can take your time in getting a piece of information that you forgot to put with your application to the funder, because they've got timelines that they're following within the structure of their funding organization. Once that review is complete, the applications are complete, then we have our grant program director flips on a little switch, and now our grant committee is able, and actually any board member who wants to, is able to go in and start reading these grant applications. We have certain board members who like to review certain parts in more detail. Like we have some finance people who love to spend the time reviewing the budget and looking at the 990 and making sure that everything is complete there. We have, a person on our committee who has run programs, who loves to look at that, like, the sustainability and the goals and the objectives, like that's her thing. And so, our board members will then go in and they'll start reviewing these applications. And then we have comment sections or comment areas for each section. So when they're reading, the grant budget, if they have questions, they put their questions in there. And then we give them usually, like a week, maybe, if not a little bit longer, so that they can review everything and ask their questions. And then we shut it off to them. And then we take those questions and we schedule our site visits with each of the potential grantees. So, having a site visit from Buhl Regional Health Foundation doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to fund you. It means that we had a lot of questions related to your grant application from different board members, and we would love to get those questions answered for you, before we go into that, grant meeting where we're going to decide which grants we're going to award funding to. For us, once we get those site visits over, we compile all of that information, and some of it we can upload back into that grant portal, but most of it is more either given in emails to our board of directors, or it's simply touched on at that grant meeting. So it's more important for Buhl Regional Health Foundation's applications for you to get the meat into your grant application so that it is read by the board members. Instead of hoping that we ask questions, oh gee, I think maybe I should have put that in there. We would rather have it all up front in the meat of your grant, because a lot of times it's a little bit harder for us to explain the answers to those questions when we're in a full meeting, especially if we have, 15 or 20 grant applications that we're reviewing, with 11 or 12 different grant committee members, in, what you're hoping to be about an hour and a half meeting. So the meat of what you're looking for needs to be written in that grant application. So then after our site visit and, we compile all the answers to our board members' questions, then we pool all of the board members together in this room and we sit and we discuss every grant application. The staff does not make the grant decisions. The staff, provides the input and the data that is needed to make the decision. It is the committee that truly makes the decision, for at least for Buhl Regional Health Foundation for our funding. And I know when I worked for the UPMC Foundation, it was the same thing. It was the grant committee who sat there. They just, pondered over every single question that was asked, every grant application. And that's where a lot of good discussion happens. Then the decisions are made by the committee. The committee is instructed as a whole that if we have decided to fund, for instance, Shenango River Watchers, that the committee as a whole funded that organization or that particular grant. We don't have our committee members out in the community, one saying, oh, well, I didn't really want to fund that. And another one, so when they leave, when that committee leaves this boardroom, they are in a unanimous agreement as to, the grants that were awarded, whether they individually wanted to award that grant or not. It was a group decision to award the grant. And a lot of foundations are like that. So the biggest thing to know as the grant writer is you've got to write enough meat to make sure that the majority of people that are sitting around a table are going to want to support that project. Again, we don't support every grant that comes through to us. I'm not even sure we support 30 to 40% of the applications that come through to us. It depends on the amount of money that we have to give out at any given time. It depends on what our investments have done for the year. What different programs we have going on that have required, different pieces of funding. And so for us, it varies from grant round to grant round. And sometimes we don't even know until right before we go into that grant round how much we're going to have to give out to the community. So it's very important as the grant writer to know and understand, that there are a lot of times where you have a really, really wonderful project that really truly does fit the guidelines and would be a great partnership, but funders simply don't have enough money to go around for all of them. And they do have to make very tough decisions sitting in those board meetings. Usually, when there is a grant committee, once the grant committee has decided on, who they're going to fund and what amounts they're going to fund, and that's the other thing, keep in mind, you don't always get 100% of what you asked for from any particular funder. If you ask for 15,000 and we're sitting around this table and we're like, well, shoot, we only have 11,000 left. But we really like this program. We might give you the 11,000 in the hopes that you're going to find the 4,000 elsewhere. Be upfront, like I said, with your funder. If you can't complete the program with partial funding, then let them know, thank you so much. I appreciate that you were willing to give us something, but we really needed the full amount. And so we're going to wait and submit for your next round, or, however you want to do it. But if you can do it with less, then reach back out, once you've found that you're awarded a lesser amount, then, your funder is going to want to know how you're going to do it with less. And so, you're going to want to resubmit probably some budget items or show them where you're going to find the additional funding. And then for us, for Buhl Regional Health Foundation, then the committee decision goes to the full board. Very rarely, and in almost any funder organization that I am aware of, very rarely does the full board go against what the committee has decided, because boards, as with every committee, or you might have a finance committee, an HR committee, whatever committee you have, it's up to the committee members to do the legwork. And they're the ones that are putting the time and the effort into ensuring that what that committee is recommending is a good recommendation. And for the most part, your boards, your full boards, know and understand the work of your committees, and they respect it, and they will go with what committees decide. And I know at UPMC Foundation, there was never even a bat of an eye. That grant committee said, we're recommending this, this, and this. We're not recommending this, this, and this. And the board would say, okay, that's fine. And I know at the Buhl Regional Health Foundation, it's the same way. The committee and the staff do the legwork. And so those are the individuals that you're writing to. Those are the people that you're pulling at the heartstrings for. Once you're awarded at Buhl Regional Health Foundation, you will get an award email, and it'll have login information, and you'll go in and you'll log in, you'll complete your contract. Usually we set up another visit with you or another meeting with you to just kind of go through, here's what we expect as far as your reporting. You have a 6-month report. Here's what we want to see in 6 months. You'll have a 1-year report. Here's what we want to see in 1 year. Are there any changes to your grant application? This would be the time, at this meeting would be the time for you to discuss those changes for us. And, a lot of times now what we're trying to do is kind of strategically tailor your 6-month report and your year report to your organization, to your goals, to your outcomes, to the data that we want to see from you. And so I know in years past, we had a very generic 6-month report, and we had a very generic final report. That is changing now with Buhl Regional Health Foundation. I think it's changing with a lot of funders. They do want to see a little bit more of the data and, you know, the information that shows that they're making a difference in the community. So, you know, that meeting is where you'll get your 6-month reporting requirements. That meeting is also where you'll get your timeline as far as when you could expect funding from us. Some projects need all of the funding up front, and we understand that. And at that point, you know, we'll talk to you about that. And, you know, provided that you're going to provide us with what we need, then, you know, we can give the check up front. Some of the organizations, you know, maybe aren't starting work for 6 months. And we understand, you know, that you don't need the money up front. To be honest with you, we would rather keep our money invested and, you know, making money for us and for our community. So if you don't need the money, you know, for 6 months, you know that you're going to have a delay in the project, or you know that, you know, you can get by with doing, you know, all of these things prior to even needing the check, then we respect that. You know, and we truly, you know, appreciate that you're saying to us, hey, you know, we only need 50% of it up front, or we only need 10% of it up front. We don't even need it until the end. Our foundation appreciates that. And then, you know, don't miss your 6-month report. Don't miss your final report. We do love to, I know Kimberly, she's on the call right now too. She's our director of grant making. She loves to get emails from our different organizations. Matter of fact, you know, an email comes through and she's like, hey, I got an email from, you know, so-and-so. Oh, it has this great picture, or here's a great newsletter. And it's passed around, you know, to the staff, it's passed on to our grant committee. Sometimes it's passed on to the entire board. So, you know, form that relationship with us. We do, you know, like to have that partnership, and we do like to know that we're making a difference in the community. That's all I really have as far as Buhl Regional Health Foundation. Jess, if you want to turn off the recording, and then we can